Every month, the evening of the first brought a predictable ritual. The front door would open, and a father, shoulders heavy with the day, would walk in to place a thin white envelope onto the wood of the kitchen table. To a child watching from the hallway, that envelope represented infinite wealth. It was the physical proof of a father's invincibility, a magic sleeve that could surely provide anything the world had to offer. But the atmosphere in the house shifted the moment the mother brought out her expense notebook. Its edges were dog-eared, and its pages were filled with cramped handwriting. When that book opened, the room grew quiet. This was the collision of two different worlds. On one side, the white envelope. On the other, a list of school fees, rent, and groceries that almost always demanded more than what the envelope could hold. To understand how a family survives this monthly deficit, we have to audit the ink in that notebook. We need to look past the numbers to find the invisible currency that actually keeps the lights on. On paper, the math of a middle-class life rarely seems to add up. To make the equation work, you have to look at the costs that aren't recorded in numbers. The mother's notebook doesn't function like a typical shopping list. It is a strict ledger of elimination. It's a record of everything that must be removed so the family can survive another 30 days. The first things to go are childhood desires. A request for a red bicycle is added to the list, only to be immediately crossed out and deferred to a vague horizon known as next month. To handle those disappointments, the father uses a stoic default promise, "Ho jayega," it will be done. He uses that phrase as a shield, absorbing the child's financial anxiety so they never have to see the deficit for themselves. Then there are the internal cuts, the illusion of newness. During major festivals, instead of buying new clothes, parents spend hours washing and ironing old outfits until they look fresh enough for a photograph. The social pressure is relentless. When alleys light up with sparklers, keeping a tight budget requires an exhausting performance of normalcy. The notebook balances the month by systematically erasing the family's wants. It sacrifices the personal desires of the parents to build a protective wall around the basic needs of the children. But math has its limits. Eventually, an unavoidable crisis arrives. A sudden illness requiring expensive medical tests, or a housing EMI that cannot be negotiated or deferred. When those entries hit the ledger, the fragile logic breaks. The balance drops into a flashing red deficit. To fix these impossible numbers, families look for something of value to surrender, moving the math back into the black. The mother quietly takes out a small wooden box and places it on the table. It contains her prized gold jewelry, her personal history, offered as a sacrifice to keep the household afloat for one more month. The true cost, however, is witnessed in the dark. It's the child waking up late at night to see their father sitting alone at the table, head in his hands, breaking down over bills. He absorbs that financial deficit by breaking himself down internally while the house is quiet. Then he gathers the pieces, puts on a smile, and projects a sense of perfect stability the very next morning. Eventually, the child stops asking for toys. They begin to realize that their father's own personal dreams weren't lost. They were simply converted into the son's education and future. The climax of this story happens at that same kitchen table. The son gets his first job, receives his own white envelope, and sits down with that old notebook to handle the math for the first time. As he adds up the rent and the groceries, he feels a crushing psychological weight. He is finally feeling the exact terror his father endured every single month for 30 years. He looks at the pen in his hand and realizes that the debt hasn't actually disappeared. The responsibility has simply moved from his father's shoulders to his own. The son slides his crisp white envelope across the table and into his father's weathered hand. In that moment, he finally provides the one thing the notebook could never afford: a night of undisturbed sleep. That salary envelope represents a generational ledger of silent love. It is the physical evidence of a family that survives not through numbers, but through sacrifice.